Ask dispense of the quorum call.
Without objection.
Madam President, I rise today to speak about an issue that is directly impacting each and every family, not just in West Virginia, but throughout this whole country. It's the high gas prices. The truth is that in states all across this nation, and particularly in West Virginia, countless families have to drive to survive. And for these families, a jump in the gas price isn't just an inconvenience or an annoyance. It's a threat that hits extremely hard in the pocketbook and could change their way of life. But as every American knows, the cycle of high gas prices is not a new phenomenon with any of us. I still vividly remember waiting in line for gas in the early 70s when gas was rationed based on our license plate number, when we could buy gas. It's something I never thought could ever happen in America, and I'm sure those that it happened to felt the same. This all came about because of our dependency on foreign oil. And if you think back to the early 1970s, we were 28% dependent on foreign oil, which we thought was a high number at that time. But today, we're more than 50% dependent on foreign oil, which has caused a massive transfer of American wealth to countries that really don't like us that much and want to do us harm. We've seen this bad movie time and again, and yet somehow it seems that Washington keeps thinking that there's going to be a different outcome or a different ending. The right ending will only come when our nation makes it a high priority to achieve energy independence within this generation. While crafting such a bold plan will be difficult, I recognize, and the special interests who oppose using our own resources like coal, natural gas, and oil in an environmentally responsible way will resist loudly. But we can no longer allow this nation and our hardworking families to be held hostage by high gas prices. And we can no longer allow partisanship in politics to undermine the common ground that can be achieved if we work together with one goal in mind: true energy independence within this generation. Let me make it perfectly clear. High gas prices are not the only high price we're paying as a nation. For decades, our brave men and women who serve us so well have been called to action in defense of our vital interests and in the Middle East and all around the world. Thousands have been killed and injured. Their families have suffered the incredible pain of loss. Our nation has spent trillions in the course of these missions, and yet too many of these oil-rich countries have and will continue to use our dependence of their oil against us. For all these reasons and for the sake of our national security, it's time for our nation to become truly energy independent within this generation. I believe that we can do it, and I know that we can because just this week in beautiful Mingo County, West Virginia, my state took a major step to confront our gas prices head-on. On Monday, West Virginia said enough is enough. On a sunny morning in the town of Gilbert, West Virginia, I helped to break ground on a promising new project that could help bring down the crushing gas prices that our families are confronting. There, entrepreneurs and the state and local governments are participating to create hundreds of jobs at a coal-to-gasoline plant that is at the forefront of any technology in the world. The anticipated production of this plant is very impressive. It is projected to convert 7,500 tons of coal, West Virginia coal, into 756 gallons of premium gasoline each and every day, which can be used to run our cars and our trucks and even some of our military equipment. Over a 4-year construction period, it's estimated that 3,000 skilled trade workers in America will be employed. And when the plant is finished, it is expected to create 300 direct jobs and hundreds of more ancillary jobs in the community. In West Virginia and Mingo County, the government is acting as our partner, and as a good partner, not an obstacle. And that is the role our federal government should take towards energy independence. This is exactly the kind of project that the federal government should work with us to make sure it succeeds. They should be our ally, not an obstacle or our adversary. If my little state has the courage to step out and invest in our independence, then the federal government should also have that courage to do the same. West Virginians are sending the right message for this country. We will not let ourselves be held hostage by foreign countries that want to see the United States be financially crippled, simply because those countries have oil. My state of West Virginia also proves that we can, and we must, use all of our domestic resources to break our cycle of dependence on foreign oil within this generation. It doesn't matter whether your state has oil, coal, natural gas, geothermal, nuclear, biomass, wind, solar, or hydro, because we have to harness all of the tremendous resources right here in America. Or we're going to continue to rely on countries that have contributed directly or indirectly towards changing America for the worse. At the end of the day, it's going to take everything we can do and every resource we have to become truly independent. That is one of the many reasons why I'm co-sponsoring the American Alternative Fuels Act with my colleague John Barrasso from Wyoming. Among other things, the bill would break down barriers to alternative energy fuels, including those from coal, biomass, algae, and waste. There are other smart, targeted actions we can take in the short term to help reduce the price of gas for our families. I've signed on to an important piece of bipartisan legislation sponsored by my friend Senator Herb Kohl from Wisconsin. It's the No Oil Producing and Exporting Cartels Act, better known as NOPEC. This bill would finally allow the Department of Justice to go after foreign countries, such as the members of OPEC, for antitrust violations because of their price-fixing behavior. The other major issue we must address now is speculators in oil company subsidies. There's no lack of oil on the market. This is not a supply issue. The real problem is just pure greed of some who are taking advantage of the instability in our world to line their pockets on the backs of the American families. Or a tax policy that just doesn't make any sense at all, that continues to subsidize oil companies when the price of a barrel of oil is at the highest it's ever been and the profits are at record high. This doesn't make any sense to American families. Wouldn't it make more sense that these subsidies that they have now should only be available when the cost of production exceeds the price of a barrel of oil? That would be a common sense solution. It would ensure the stability and steady production, and it doesn't force taxpayers to fill the bank accounts of major oil companies when they're already making record profits. Because we must do so much more to protect American families, I've also encouraged the Commodity Futures Trading Commission to take aggressive steps in the short term to regulate and pursue the oil speculators who are driving the price of a gallon of gas through the ceiling. While the most important thing our country can do is establish a national energy plan for independence, all of these actions are steps we can take to make sure that we relieve the financial pressures on our families and help secure our country. For all the wonderful families of West Virginia and for the great people of the United States of America and of all of our children and grandchildren, this country must finally answer the call. It is time, Madam President. It is truly time. It is time to free this nation, put politics aside, and work together to make energy independence a national priority. I truly believe that if we work together as Americans and focus on a common-sense approach, that we can develop a strong bipartisan energy plan that will not only break the power of foreign oil countries and speculators, but use the resources that we have right here in America. We can chart a new and promising energy future for this great nation, and we must start today. Thank you, Madam President. And I notice the absence of quorum also.
Madam President.
Senator from Illinois.
Madam President, I want to thank the Senator from West Virginia for his comments on our dependence on foreign oil. We import about $1 billion worth of oil a day. That does not make our nation any stronger. In fact, it makes us more dependent. And for our economy to grow, we need to have good homegrown energy sources. We may never be totally independent, but if we don't move toward independence, then I'm afraid we're going to continue to be victimized, as we have been recently, by not only oil companies, but the greed that you mentioned, that drives up gasoline prices every spring, just as sure as the baseball season's going to open. Gasoline prices are going to go sky high, and then they're going to retreat back, but they never retreat back to where they started. They always end up higher as we go into the summer vacation season. The Senator from West Virginia has some thoughtful ideas here on how to address this, and I share his support of Herb Kohl's legislation that deals with NOPEC, the OPEC cartel, and the fact that we've been victimized by them for way too long. Like your state, we have a lot of coal in Illinois. We want to find an environmentally responsible way to use it, to take all the energy out of the ground and to put it to work for America so Americans can go to work. I thank you for your leadership on this important topic. Madam President, closer to home in Illinois, we're fighting the floods. It happens regularly, and we've had a tough time with it. The Ohio River, the Illinois River, the Mississippi River have all been threatening communities like Metropolis and Old Shawneetown. I was down in Cairo, Illinois, just a couple weeks ago and saw how bad it was, and it was a scary situation in a very poor town. The Corps of Engineers had a tough decision to make. They had to blow a levee, which means opening up farmland to be flooded to take the pressure off the rivers. They did it. I said to General Walsh when he was in the process of making the decision, do what's right, and I'll stand by you. I know what I want you to do, but do what's right. I think he did the right thing, and I stand by him. And now I stand by those living in Missouri who were affected by that decision. If they were in any way suffer hardship or inconvenience or loss of income as farmers, we need to stand by them, as we do with so many across America in times of disasters. I know we've had a big challenge in our state. Governor Quinn and I were on the phone just the day before yesterday talking about the response. He was on his way down to Metropolis. A mutual friend of ours, Mayor Billy McDaniel down there, is working with Pulaski County Board Chairman Monty Russell to find places for people to stay as they wait for the floodwaters to recede in Metropolis. In Carmire, Mayor David Port and Golconda Mayor Bill Altman are working with our office to make sure the pumps and other supplies are there when they're needed. And in Carroll, we had a change in administration. I worked with Judson Childs, the former mayor. He has now been replaced by Tyrone Coleman. We'll continue to work with them. They've vacated a lot of homes. People are staying in gyms and other places and waiting for a chance to go back home, and we're going to do our best to make sure that happens. Special salute to our Illinois National Guard. These men and women come to the rescue of our state every time we face a disaster, and this is no different. They're putting in long, long hours, and I thank them for their unselfish commitment. And General Bill Inyard, you can be proud of the men and women of the Guard units across the state of Illinois. The Illinois Emergency Management Agency under Director Jonathan Mnuchin has been in touch with our office every single day. They are assessing the damage that has been done. They will measure that damage, and at the appropriate moment, and I'm sure it will be soon, will move forward with our congressional delegation to ask for federal disaster status and federal disaster assistance. That is something that I think will definitely be needed and is appropriate for the magnitude of this challenge. I'll work with my colleague, Senator Kirk, who visited just last week in this region. We're going to work together in a bipartisan way to make sure that our state and the people who are suffering under these flooding conditions have a chance to recover, get back to their homes and back to their businesses and back to work. Madam President, I'd like consent that the statement I'm about to make is in a separate part of the congressional record.
Without objection.
We had a historic vote in the United States Senate last December, Madam President, on the DREAM Act. Senator Harry Reid, the Majority Leader, promised that we would bring this measure for consideration on the floor of the Senate. Some people on both sides of the aisle said it's a bad idea, don't do it, but he kept his word, and I'm glad he did. We called it, had 3 Republican votes, and we fell short. Oh, we had a majority. Seems like we always have a majority when we call this bill, but because of the threat of a Republican filibuster, we needed 60 votes, and we didn't reach the 60 vote necessary. 55 senators, a bipartisan majority, voted for the DREAM Act, and I've reintroduced it today. By way of background, this is a simple piece of legislation, but it's one that affects thousands of people across America. It came to my attention 10 years ago when a Korean-American woman called me in my Chicago office and told me she had a problem. She'd come to the United States about 18 years before and brought her little girl with her. She'd raised a family. She was now a naturalized citizen. The children who were born in the United States were citizens. But her older daughter was in a different status. And her older daughter was a special person. Her older daughter was a concert pianist who had been accepted at the Juilliard School of Music in New York, the best. And as she filled out the application form and they asked for her citizenship, she turned to her mom and she said, USA, right? And her mom said, you know, we never filed any papers for you. So the little girl said, what should we do? And her mom said, we ought to call Durbin. So they called my office thinking I could solve this, and I found out the awful truth. Our laws currently say the only recourse for that little girl who came here at the age of 2, who grew up in the United States, going to school here, saying the Pledge of Allegiance to our flag every morning, singing the only national anthem she knew, speaking the only language she knew under our law, could never be a United States citizen and had to leave our country. What's wrong with this? Well, it's unfair. That's what's wrong. At 2 years of age, she had no voice in the decision of her family to come here, and she'd done everything right. And all she was asking for, all she continues to ask for, is a chance to be part of the only country she's ever known, a country she dearly loves. The DREAM Act gives young people that chance. It says you can have a chance if you graduate high school, have no criminal record involving anything of a serious nature, if you are prepared to go through and prove that you have been in the United States, came before the age of 16, been here at least 5 years, then you'll have a chance to apply. And if you apply, you have 2 ways that you can reach legal status in our country: serve in our military or complete at least 2 years of college. For thousands of young people across America, this is the only way to get them out of their current situation. We just had a press conference with Senator Harry Reid and Senator Bob Menendez, as well as Senator Blumenthal of Connecticut, to reintroduce this DREAM Act. And at that press conference was a young woman who told her story. And like thousands of others, it's a compelling personal story. Her name is Tolu Olubunmi. She was born in Nigeria and brought to the United States as a child. She graduated her high school with honors. She was awarded a full scholarship to one of the nation's top universities. In college, she was a leader, a peer counselor, a resident assistant, a volunteer in an abused women's shelter, and a research analyst in the Department of Engineering. Tolu received a bachelor's degree in chemical engineering in 2002, but she has never been able to work one day as a chemical engineer in America because she is undocumented. She cannot leave this country because she couldn't return. She can't get a job in this country because she's undocumented. Her whole life is focused on America, and she's asking for a chance to be an engineer, to be a productive part of America, to move us forward as a nation. The DREAM Act would give her that chance. When we introduced the bill today, we have 32 original co-sponsors. We're hoping for more. We have the Democratic leadership, the chairs of the Judiciary, Armed Services, and Homeland Security Committees, and all 10 Democratic members of the Judiciary Committee. I want to thank the lead sponsors over in the House, Howard Berman of California, Luis Gutierrez of my state of Illinois, and Ileana Ros-Lehtinen of Florida. Thanks to their leadership last year, the House passed the DREAM Act. And I want to especially thank the President. As a senator and my colleague from Illinois, he was a co-sponsor of this bill. He has been a strong supporter ever since. He never fails to mention the DREAM Act in his conversations with America about immigration. Yesterday, he said, these are kids who grew up in this country, love this country, and know no other place as home. The idea that we should punish them is cruel, and it makes no sense. We are a better nation than that. The President's right. This is a matter of simple justice. Thousands of immigrant students in America were brought here as children. It wasn't their decision to come here, but they grew up here, and they called it home. The fundamental premise of the DREAM Act is an American premise. We don't hold children responsible for the wrongdoings of their parents. These young people don't want a free pass. They don't want amnesty. All they want is a chance to earn their place in America. That's what the DREAM Act would give them. The DREAM Act would strengthen our national security, making thousands of young people eligible to serve. That's why the Department of Defense and Secretary Gates support it. In fact, the Secretary said, "There's a rich precedent supporting the service of non-citizens in the U.S. military. The DREAM Act represents an opportunity to expand this pool to the advantage of military recruiting and readiness." Madam President, the first casualty in the war in Iraq was an Hispanic who was not a citizen of the United States, wasn't even a permanent resident of the United States, but he had volunteered, served his country, and gave his life. I think that shows the level of commitment these young people have to this great nation. A recent study at UCLA found that allowing the DREAM Act to pass would put so many productive young people into our economy. They will generate jobs, they will build businesses, they will help our economy grow. I want to salute in your home state of New York, Madam President, Mayor Michael Bloomberg, who has spoken out in support of the DREAM Act and said, "They are just the kind of immigrants we need to help solve our unemployment problem. Some of them will go on to create new small businesses and hire people. It's senseless for us to chase out the homegrown talent that has the potential to contribute so significantly to our society." When you take a look at the supporters of the DREAM Act, they have such diverse backgrounds. They include business leaders like Rupert Murdoch and the CEOs of companies like Microsoft and Pfizer. Now, there are some who oppose the DREAM Act and argue that we need to enhance border security first. I can certainly make the argument, as the President did yesterday, that we have done extraordinary things, more than doubling the number of people at the border, adding technical devices there to detect people who are trying to cross, using drones, building fences. We have gone, I think, as far as I can imagine, but I am open. I've told a Republican senator this morning, I am open to any reasonable suggestion to make the border safer. But I say to my friends on the other side of the aisle, if we show good faith in border enforcement, can you join us by showing good faith in helping to pass the DREAM Act? I don't think that's an unreasonable exchange. I'm open to their ideas. I hope that they're open to the idea of the DREAM Act. I also have to say that many of the young people who are affected by this have been dramatically positive in their contribution to America. There are restrictions in the DREAM Act that prevent abuse. The DREAM Act students would not be eligible for Pell Grants or other federal grants, which means they're going to pay more to go to school. DREAM Act students would be subject to tough criminal penalties for fraud, including a prison sentence of up to 5 years. No one's eligible for the DREAM Act unless they arrive in the United States at least 5 years before the bill becomes law, and there's no exception and no waiver. Also, the DREAM Act specifically includes a 1-year application deadline. An individual would be required to apply for conditional non-immigrant status within 1 year of obtaining a high school degree or GED, or within 1 year when the bill becomes law. This is not an amnesty. Many of the occasions I've come to the floor to tell the personal stories of the people who are involved. Their lives speak more eloquently than anything I can say on the floor. Let me tell you about Nelson and John Magdaleno. They are brothers who came to the United States from Venezuela when Nelson was 11 and John was 9. They were both honor students at Lakeside High School in Atlanta, Georgia. This is a picture of Nelson Magdaleno at graduation. John, his brother, served with distinction in the Air Force Junior Officer Reserve Corps. He was the fourth highest ranking officer in a 175-officer cadet unit and commander of the Air Honor Society. Here's a picture of John in his ROTC uniform from high school. Now, both John and Nelson are honors students at Georgia Tech University, a great school. It's one of the most selective engineering schools in America. Nelson, who is now 21, is a junior. He's a computer engineering major with a 3.6 GPA. John, 18, is a freshman. He's a biomedical engineering major with a 4.0 GPA. Let me ask you, can we afford to lose these two young people? Well, I guess we could, but at great expense, because their talent, their energy, their determination to make a contribution to America can make us a better nation. I don't think they're returning to Venezuela, a country that they've never called home, is going to be good for the United States. John David Bunting, Nelson and John's uncle, wrote me a letter about his nephews. Here's what he said. They will be able to give back so much to our country if allowed to stay. I'm overwhelmed by my pride in them and how they managed to persevere and even flourish under these circumstances. I also have 2 young sons, their uncle wrote, and I teach them about the incredible history of the United States and the way that our country can address wrongs committed in its name and come out of the process even stronger. Please help us. Nelson and John asked the Department of Homeland Security to stop their deportation proceedings. After I received their uncle's letter, I contacted the department and asked them to consider this case. The department has decided to grant a stay to Nelson and John to give them a chance to continue their education. That was clearly the right thing to do. Now, some have criticized the Obama administration for granting this kind of deferral action to a small number of DREAM Act students. But this is exactly what the Bush administration did. And I want to commend President George Bush, who was steadfast and consistent in his support of immigration reform. It is a waste of limited resources to deport 2 fine engineering students from the United States, and it's entirely consistent with the law to grant them deferred action. Let me tell you about another student, Pedro Pedroza. Here's his photograph. Pedro was brought to Chicago from Mexico when he was 5 years old. Graduated from St. Agnes Catholic School in Little Village, a great part of our city of Chicago. He was an honor student at St. Ignatius College Prep, one of the best in Chicago. He's now a student in New York, Madam President, at Cornell University in Ithaca. His goal is to become a teacher. Do we need teachers with his qualities? You bet we do. Not just in New York and Illinois, but all across America. But, unfortunately, Pedro is in deportation proceedings. He was riding a bus from Chicago back to school in New York when immigration agents arrested him. He has asked the Department of Homeland Security to grant him a stay, and I hope they will. It makes no sense to send someone like Pedro, who has so much to contribute, to a country he barely remembers. Here's what he wrote me in a letter. Mexico is not only unfamiliar to me, but leaving the U.S. means leaving everything and everyone I know. I only hope I can earn a future in the U.S. for as long as I'm here. Even if I'm left no choice but to leave for Mexico, I would still strive to adjust my status and return to the place I consider home, the United States of America. The last chart I want to show you is Steve Lee. It's his photograph. His parents brought him to the United States when he was 11 years old. He's a student at the City College of San Francisco, where he's majoring in nursing and is a leader in student government. Steve wrote me a letter, and here's what it said. My dream is to become a registered nurse at San Francisco General Hospital and to be a public health advocate. I want to be able to give back to my community by raising awareness about preventive care and other health care issues. I'm well on my way to achieving that dream. By passing the DREAM Act, I'll be able to achieve these goals and contribute to the growing health care industry. So could we use more health care professionals? You bet we could. Nurses, we need a lot of them. In fact, the United States imports thousands of foreign nurses each year into this country because we just don't have enough. Unfortunately, Steve Lee is also in deportation proceedings. His case is especially complicated because while his parents are Chinese, he was born in Peru. So he could be deported back to Peru where he knows no one and has no family members. Senator Feinstein asked the Department of Homeland Security to consider his case. They've given him a temporary stay for now. Madam President, I first introduced the DREAM Act 10 years ago. Since then, I've met so many immigrant students who would qualify for it. When I first brought this bill up, I used to have meetings in Chicago, and after the meetings, without fail, there would be someone waiting for me outside. Sometimes in the dark of night, they'd be standing by my car. They were always young, and most of them had tears in their eyes. And they'd say to me, Senator Durbin, please pass the DREAM Act. It's my life. Times have changed. 10 years of effort, even passing it with majority hasn't resulted in this becoming a law because of the Republican filibuster. Times have changed to the point where the DREAM Act students are now stepping up and saying, here we are. This is who we are. We're not going to hide in the shadows anymore. When we debated that bill on the floor of the Senate last December, the galleries were filled with students wearing graduation gowns and caps, waiting, praying for the vote, and it failed. They left, many of them crying, went downstairs, and I met with them. And they couldn't have felt worse. They just don't know where to turn. They're being rejected by the only country they've ever known, the only place they've ever called home. I said to him, I'm not giving up on you. Don't give up on me. We're going to keep working on this. We reintroduced the bill today. I thank my colleagues who've already co-sponsored it. I urge and plead with others who have not for simple justice and fairness. Give these young people a chance. That's all they're asking for. Madam President, I yield the floor and suggest the I yield the floor.
Madam President.
Senator from Rhode Island.
Madam President, before I make my own remarks, let me just express my great appreciation to Senator Durbin of Illinois for his many years of leadership on this. I'm very proud to be a co-sponsor of his legislation, and I look forward to passing this bill. I'm reminded of the story in the Bible of Joshua at Jericho. It was not the first time around Jericho that the horns of Joshua and his Israelite army brought down the walls. If I recall my Bible correctly, it was 7 times around those walls before they came tumbling down. But tumble down is what they did, and I look forward to joining the Joshua of this crusade, Senator Durbin, to go around those walls as long as it takes in order to get the DREAM Act passed. I am here on a different topic today, Madam President. I am here to call for the end of the $4 billion in giveaways that taxpayers are providing to big oil companies every year. At a time of skyrocketing gas prices and of record oil company profits and of difficult decisions about where and how to cut the federal deficit, we should not be providing big oil with expensive and unnecessary taxpayer handouts. Gas prices nationwide are averaging $3.96, up over $1 from this time a year ago. In my home state of Rhode Island, the average price per gallon is now over $4. These prices are putting a significant dent in family budgets across the country. In the last 50 years, prices in real terms have only been this high twice. In 1981, after the oil crisis, and in parts of 2007 and 2008. High gas prices not only increase the cost of driving, but they leave families with less to spend on other basic necessities. And they ripple through the economy as gas-guzzling buses strain school district and public transportation budgets, food prices increase from trucking costs, and throughout wherever transportation is a factor, it raises costs for American consumers. The current price spike could not have come at a worse time. When gas prices last peaked in July 2008, unemployment nationally was 5.8%. Now unemployment nationally is 8.8%, and it's even higher in many states. In my home state, Rhode Island, we are still struggling under a staggering 11% unemployment rate. I recently heard from a constituent, Tony, in Wakefield, Rhode Island, about the impact that rising gas prices have had on his wallet. He said, "We have few options to offset the higher pricing and thus much less to spend." Gas prices are forcing individuals like Tony to make difficult choices about what to cut out of the family budget. Yet, even as families are struggling, oil companies are once again reaping record profits. Here are the earnings numbers that the oil companies recently announced for this quarter. ConocoPhillips earned a first-quarter profit of $3 billion, up 44% from the period last year. Chevron earned $6.2 billion, a 36% increase in profit. Royal Dutch Shell earned $6.3 billion, a 30% increase in profit. BP earned $7.1 billion, a 17% increase in profit. And the big one, ExxonMobil, earned a profit in one quarter of $10.7 billion, a 69% increase from last year in quarterly profit. These companies combined for a total profit of $33.3 billion in the first quarter. That is $370 million per day, or more than $250,000 in profit every minute. I've probably been speaking for at least 4 minutes, so they've made $1 million. There's a direct correlation between how much consumers pay at the pump and how much oil companies rake in. As gas prices climbed from 2002 to 2008, so did profits. When gas prices fell in 2009, down went profits. And sure enough, as gas prices climb again to over $4 per gallon, oil profits are up sharply. With people in Rhode Island and across the country being forced to tighten their budgets, and with the federal government working to reduce our deficit, it is all the more frustrating to read about these taxpayer-subsidized, sky-high profits. At the very least, when we're looking at cutting Head Start, for instance, we should not be wasting $4 billion per year in precious taxpayer dollars to help these big oil companies earn higher profits. They are doing wonderfully well on their own. So I am proud to join my colleagues in introducing the Close Big Oil Tax Loopholes Act to end some of these egregious subsidies for the Big Five oil companies. To highlight a few, the proposal would repeal subsidies to oil companies for producing oil overseas. It would repeal a deduction that can often eliminate federal taxes for oil companies. And it would repeal the head-scratching classification of oil companies as manufacturers, which allows them to take a tax credit aimed at getting our manufacturing industry back on its feet. It is time to close these loopholes and make sure oil companies are paying their fair share to help us lower our deficit. I'd like to ask unanimous consent to enter into the record an op-ed from Jacqueline Savitz of Oceana that ran today in my hometown paper, the Providence Journal, calling on Congress to end these handouts. I've also called on President Obama to release some of our oil stored in our nation's strategic petroleum reserve. History has shown that releasing some of this oil into the market can have a short-term impact on prices. When President George H.W. Bush announced that he was authorizing a drawdown in 1991, oil prices fell by nearly $10 per barrel the next day. There is not much that we can do to reduce oil prices in the near term, but this action could bring some relief to American consumers. We must also clamp down on excessive oil speculation. I joined 47 of my colleagues in opposing a Republican proposal to cut 1/3 of the funding for the Commodities Futures Trading Commission, the cop on the beat for improper speculation. The commission is responsible for cracking down on illegal speculative activity that artificially inflates the price of oil. We need to make sure that Wall Street is not unfairly gouging prices and hurting middle-class families. We should not be taking this cop off that beat. I'm joining Senators Cantwell and Wyden in sending a letter calling on the Commission to impose the position limits on oil trading that were required by the Dodd-Frank Wall Street Reform Bill. This congressionally imposed deadline has already passed, and the Commission should act swiftly to protect consumers by helping to restrain speculation. I'm glad that President Obama has directed an investigation into the role of speculation in our current gas prices. In the long run, we must invest in electric vehicles, alternative fuels, public transit, high-speed rail, and freight rail. Each of these transportation methods can significantly reduce our reliance on oil in the transportation sector. Indeed, moving freight by rail is 3 times more fuel efficient than by truck. If we don't take long-term action, these price spikes that we're seeing now are going to keep on coming. We've seen them before, and we will see them again. As President Obama said, the U.S. keeps going, quote, from shock to trance on the issue of energy security, rushing to propose action when gas prices rise, then hitting the snooze button when they fall again. Let's not hit the snooze button after this one. Let's take the long-term action necessary to get our country off of foreign oil. But in the meantime, let's work together to end the unnecessary and costly $4 billion giveaway to these highly profitable oil companies. and promote instead long-term solutions to move us off oil and to protect American consumers from the harmful price shocks they are now experiencing. I would leave with this question. Can the deficit be at once the most important challenge facing our nation, as many of my colleagues say it is, and at the same time less important than protecting big oil subsidies? I think not, and I yield the floor. I would note the absence of a quorum.
Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Okaka.
Senator from Alabama,
I would ask that the quorum call be dispensed with.
without objection.
I would ask to be able to speak in morning business for up to 15 minutes.
Without objection.
Madam President, a headline in the Hill today reads, quote, "Budgets everywhere, but not a single one has the votes to pass," close quote. Well, that's not exactly correct. In reality, there is only one budget that has been presented, publicly debated, worked on in committee, shared with the American people, and passed on the floor, and one has. And that is the budget of the Republican House. Paul Ryan led the fight on that, and it is a courageous, serious budget that would restore fiscal sanity and prosperity to this nation. It deals with that short-term funding crisis and long-term stability of our financial system. We had another budget presented. That was presented by President Obama. It was an irresponsible budget. The budget presented by President Obama to the Senate, it's about this thick, required by law the President to submit one every year. He has some 500 people on his staff in the budget office that helps prepare that. That budget, analyzed by the Congressional Budget Office, our independent group of analysts, was found to not reduce the debt path we're on, but to actually increase the debt over 10 years more than would occur based on the Congressional Budget Office baseline that we're already on. Substantially, $2 trillion more. It had tax increases in it, too. This is not a responsible budget. It was never received responsibly in the Senate, not by the independent commentators. They all said it failed to do the job that we have to do. And I have to say, by contrast to the House, there still is no Senate Democratic budget. A budget is set up to be passed by a simple majority, and the majority party has the responsibility and always does, sometimes meet it, sometimes not, present a budget. So no action has even been scheduled in the Budget Committee. No plan has been shared with the American public, and no resolution has been brought up for a vote. In fact, it has been 742 days since the Senate passed the budget. 2 years. So the Democratic-led Senate has missed the statutory deadline of April 15th to produce a budget for the second year in a row. In fact, as a statutory requirement, the committee started its work by April 1st. We haven't begun it yet now, well into May. So is there any wonder that this country is in a financial crisis, that we're not containing spending when we don't even have a budget? We didn't even bring one up to the floor last year. Majority Leader Reid chose not to bring a budget to the floor for debate, even attempt to pass a budget. So we are in the middle of a fiscal crisis. There is no doubt that the single greatest threat to America at this point in time is the financial situation we're in. This year, we will spend, by September 30th, we're moving on to that date, $3,700 billion, $3.7 trillion. We'll bring in revenue, $2,200 billion, $2.2 trillion. 40 cents of every dollar we're spending this year is borrowed. It's an unsustainable path, as every expert has told us in the Budget Committee, where I'm ranking Republican there. We've heard that witness after witness, Democrat and Republican, the President's own debt commission, tell us we're on an unsustainable path. Mr. Erskine Bowles, the man chosen by President Obama to head the fiscal commission President Obama himself established, told us that, along with Alan Simpson, his co-chairman, that this nation has never faced a more predictable financial crisis. We're heading right to it. It's going to hammer us, not to our grandchildren and great-grandchildren. If we don't get off this course, the bond markets are going to revolt. We're going to have a serious financial crisis of some kind that's not going to be good for this economy. And that, when asked when such a crisis could occur, Mr. Bowles said 2 years, maybe a little less, maybe a little more. Alan Simpson said, I think it could be 1 year. So these are our independent people who love America. They're warning us we need to take action now. And the President's budget simply doesn't get it. And, you know, the American people are not happy with us. They think we're not meeting our responsibilities. Are they right? They hammered a lot of big spenders in the last election. Were they right? I totally believe that they're right. I totally am of the view there is no way this country should be in the debt situation we are in. It should never, ever, ever have happened. I opposed a lot of this spending. I like to think I was more vigorous than most in warning against it, but I don't think I've done enough. There's no reason we're borrowing 40 cents out of every dollar we spend. It threatens our future. We will double the entire debt of our country in 4 years under the President's watch. When he leaves office, completes his 4-year term, he will have double the entire debt of America, and we're on a course that continues to be dangerous. Now, as we know, Budget Chairman Senator Conrad has been meeting privately with his Democratic caucus that's been in the press to try to finally bring some sort of budget forward. And the Democrats apparently have been unable to do so from the reports we see because the big spenders in their caucus cannot support a plan that would actually get the job done and put us on a sound financial path, and they can't produce a plan that will withstand public scrutiny, apparently, that the American people would support. So they have a difficult problem. This was shown, as reported in the Hill, because Chairman Conrad, who I think he served on the Debt Commission, I believe fully understands the dangers this country faces. He's repeatedly acknowledged that, and I really respect Senator Conrad's insight into the challenges this country faces. But apparently, his proposal, which was I assume was going to be somewhat better than President Obama's, failed to win the support of his conference and of Senator Bernie Sanders, who is an open and gutsy senator, who's open and about what he believes, but who has described himself as a socialist and is the Senate's most powerful advocate for bigger government. He's a member of the Budget Committee. The reason Senator Sanders' vote became important was because the Democrats have apparently been working to pass a budget through committee without Republican votes. They don't expect to get any Republican votes, and the committee only has one more Democrat than Republicans, so the chairman needs Senator Sanders' vote if he wants to get the budget out of committee. So here's an excerpt from the Hill. Quote, Reid said Senator Conrad presented to the Democratic caucus a 50-50 split when asked about the preferred ratio of spending cuts to tax increases. Conrad has moved his budget proposal to the left in order to gain the support of Senator Bernie Sanders, an outspoken progressive on the budget panel, close quote. You know, progressive is a new word they're using now for big government types. They think they want to take more money from the American people because they believe they know how to better spend it than the American people who earned it. They want to take it and spread it around the way they want to spend it. Well, this is a remarkable turn of events, I've got to say. It's particularly stunning because the President's budget, repudiated for its dramatic levels of spending and taxes, claimed that there was a 3-to-1 ratio of spending cuts to tax hikes. We cut spending $3 for every one tax hike is what the President said. And Chairman Conrad has indicated that would have been his choice. He praised that. And he claims that, and has said he favored that same ratio. I don't think that's necessarily a good ratio. I think we need to reduce spending more than that. Taken literally, what this means is that Senator Conrad has, in a fundamental respect, moved his plan to the left of the President and the Fiscal Commission, which also proposed a plan that actually did reduce spending $3 for every one in tax increases, or pretty close to that, pretty fairly in their numbers without gimmicks, came close to achieving that, not quite, but it came close to. The President's budget was so gimmicked that it really did not achieve $3 in spending cuts for every one of tax increases. It did not. It wasn't correct for him to say that. So it's important to note that the President and the Fiscal Commission used a baseline which assumes tax rates will go up. Fairly analyzed, those plans rely much more heavily on taxing than those ratios indicate, as I said, and I fear that the composition of this new Democratic budget proposal may not even meet the 50-50 plan they have said. The others haven't in terms of taxes and spending cuts. So the merits of this 50-50 split between savings and taxes is both a question of philosophy and economics. Philosophically, the American people do not want Washington to continue raising taxes to pay for larger and larger spending. American families should not be punished for the sins and excess of Washington. According to the CBO, we're going to spend $45 trillion over the next 10 years. The Senate Democratic plan, which no one is likely to see until after the committee meets, that's what we've been told. We won't see it until it's plopped down at the beginning of the committee markup where amendments are supposed to be offered, at least soon thereafter. Their own plan, at least from what we read about it, says it will cut or save just $2 trillion out of 45 over the next 10 years. The American people know there's much, much more we can and must do to bring this government under control and to achieve real balance in this country. Balance. What kind of balance? Between raising taxes and cutting spending, 50-50? No. I tell you the balance we need. We need a balance that respects the American people, that reduces the growth in spending and wealth taken by Washington and allows it to be kept by the American people who earned it. Now, there's also a question of economics. Our committee has conducted an exhaustive survey of available research which conclusively shows that debt reduction plans that rely equally on saving money, reducing spending, and raising taxes are far less successful and result in far weaker economic growth than those plans which rely on cutting spending. We will release a white paper very soon that will share these findings with my colleagues and with the country. It's very important that we understand this. What history is showing to us is that when you reduce spending, you get more growth and more prosperity than increasing spending and increasing taxes. Here is what some of is one example of the many studies that we analyzed and that will be released soon. This is a Goldman Sachs study by their analysts Ben Broadbent and Kevin Daly. The report resulted from a cross-national study of fiscal reforms that, quote, in a review of every major fiscal correction in the OECD, that's the Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development, that is the world's most developed economies, since 1975, quote, we find that decisive budgetary adjustments that have focused on reducing government expenditure have, one, been successful in correcting fiscal imbalances, two, typically boosted economic growth, and three, resulted in a significant bond and equity market outperformance. In other words, the stock market and the bond market improved. And both of those are a bit shaky now after some rebound. Tax-driven tax-driven, that means tax increases, fiscal adjustments, by contrast, typically fail to correct fiscal imbalances and are damaging growth, close quote. That's a Goldman Sachs study. Half our U.S. Treasury Department has been considered a right-wing group, but that's what their analyst has said to us. So the Democratic Senate, I believe, should heed the large body of research showing that spending cuts on a basic economic level work better than trying to drain more out of the economy by way of taxes. In other words, the Senate should produce a budget based on facts. They should produce a budget that grows the economy, that imposes real spending discipline on Washington. They should produce a budget without gimmicks and empty promises. They should produce this budget publicly, openly, and allow the American people to review and consider it before the committee meets. 72 hours, as my colleagues have pleaded with the chairman twice to do, but apparently they will not do. They should produce a budget that the American people deserve, an honest budget that spares our children from both the growing burden of debt and the growing burden of an intrusive big government. I hope that we can continue to have the opportunity to talk about this issue. It's the right thing that American people be engaged in it, and I have to say, feel like that we failed in our responsibility to conduct open hearings and markups on a budget. I thank the chair and would yield the floor.
Mr. President.
Senator from Iowa.
Mr. President, I have 10 unanimous consent requests for committees to meet